Based on that, they come up with about 350 is their estimate of what would be not harmful. But then they said, we know everybody has some exposure coming from other sources. So we're going to only allow 20% to come from your drinking water. So 20% of 350 lands you on the number of 70. So now you got like 35 and 305 fold difference between where we know in animal studies harm can occur and where we think no chance of harm would occur. That's what the 70 is. HSDR went through, looked at all the same literature with their own set of scientists, and scientists always are a bit in disagreement. They came up with the same concept of a number below which they think will cause no harm, and they came up with 14 and 21 for kids, and they came up with, for adults, can you give me the adult numbers? I'm sorry to put you on the spot. They're above 70, I believe. Yeah, like it's like the number, for adults, they actually came up with higher numbers than the 70 part per trillion in drinking water for adults, and 14 and 21 for kids. Okay, what do you take away from this as a toxicologist? I take away from it, it's largely noise. It is that you can come up with 3 different scientists all doing their best efforts, and they come up with different numbers, and you can range from 14, from this 14 to 21 area up to like 350, and none of it have we evidenced either in humans or in animals ever causing harm. That's the numbers we base our decisions off of. Numbers that have never shown to cause harm. You'd have to be way above that, and that's why, that's where they want to do these health studies to find out and advance the research. Can people really be harmed by 1,400 or 2,000 municipal drinking water? Yes?
So that is a government report, and there are more than 3 scientists involved in that report. That being a government report, more than 3 scientists involved in that report, and I do believe, skimming through it, way beyond my purview, but I do believe there were human studies done in that report. So are you discounting that is a new recommended guideline?
And we're well aware of those and not discounting it. And we actually, and when we're doing our work and looking at, well, I guess what I'm trying to say, and I'm saying it really badly, and I apologize, is that we look at, we really appreciate ATSDR coming out with these numbers because they gave us some new ones so that when we can look at it on a chemical by chemical basis, I would describe it this way. If I'm below 14 and 21, I'm basically saying that's almost no risk. I'm between 14, 21, and 70. There's some low amount of risk for the most sensitive individuals that I can't rule out. People who would be extremely sensitive, probably small, fetal exposure, exposed for a very long time. There might be some very sensitive individuals who could suffer harm later in life that they would not otherwise have suffered, okay? And then when you get above 70, and as you get incrementally higher and higher and higher, I know when I get to 3,500, that there's that study where they looked at 60,000 some people, and a small percentage of those, greater than expected, ended up with cancer and some of these very scary words of chronic disease. But not everybody. It wasn't like everybody's drinking the water down there, got sick. It took one of these very carefully designed long-term research studies and a bunch of scientists to sort through the data and say, we think we see a pattern here. We think we see that this chemical could contribute to disease that would not have otherwise happened. So it's all about the dose, and we are well aware and are looking at those numbers, and we'll come up with some more formal statement on how we look at the health department. But we're thinking about them now, and we're giving advice, and that's why in this case, what did we do? We said, we're giving people bottled water, we're doing filters, and we're going, we think, and we hope we're right, well beyond whatever Dave Harn and his colleagues will discover, in this area. So we think we put in a buffer zone, we think we ended it as quickly as possible when we found out about it, and going back in the past, that is totally perfectly good criticism, so.
Hang on 1 second, there was a gentleman back there in the green checkered shirt, with a beard that had raised his hand earlier, if you'd like to interrupt.
Just a real quick question. My name is David Benak from Western Michigan University, and just wanted to have you address that comment you just made about these being dose not relevant. As an endocrine disruptor, we do know that dose is not necessarily the issue, and that ATSDR report does have much lower levels.
I think your mic timed out, you might have to push the bottom again if you need it.
Now we're back, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. Okay. Did everybody hear his question? Sort of, how does this relate to endocrine disruption effects? I don't know, do you want to speak more to that, or do you want me to say something? Okay, I'm gonna turn it over to Jordan.
Yeah. So that's correct. The ATSDR numbers added an additional factor. They divided by 10, an additional set of 10 to account for immunological consequences in pups, rat pups that were seen, and that was not applied in the EPA number. So the EPA number was determined, developmental effects were determined to be the most sensitive endpoint by the scientists who looked at the same literature at the EPA, and the immunological effects were deemed to be most sensitive by the scientists who looked at it at the ATSDR. So yes, there's an additional factor of 10 that's included in the ATSDR number to account for immunological effects. But I'm not sure if that actually answers your question. Okay.
What I'd like to do, and I'll take you in just a second, is I know that they plan on staying around, and if you have other questions, they'll be happy to answer. I would like to get on to the next portion of kind of giving you folks an idea in the well area. I'll get you in just a second of what the plans are. We have our engineers from Brian Newhoff here that will talk about what we've learned so far in Lansing about what the timelines and stuff are. So I'm going to take this gentleman's question here, and then I'd like to move on, but they will stay and answer your questions. And I don't have a real long agenda after this. It'll go real quick, so then it can just be questions and answers with these folks afterwards, so we can get business finished up. Young man, your name and address, please.
Thank you for calling me a young man. My name's Bob Barber. I live at 5692 Shangri-La Drive. I'm just off Mount Olivet. And I put a comment into the concerned citizens of Cooper Township over the weekend. Like a lot of people, I went up to get water. They told me I didn't need it. Went out of town, came back, and had that letter. And I'm like, what is going on here?
I get that.
So I ripped off an email and a post, and fortunately I've got my answers to that and kind of understand that. But I got to correct something I put in that post. This all happened, if you look at it, has happened over how many years since those mills were there? And 20 years ago, those mills were closed. Now, we can say, you know, come here and rant and rail at these people, rant and rail at the people in Lansing, but really, most of these people weren't here when any of this went down. So they're responsible for the response. And, you know, actually, if you look back, it should be no surprise to anybody that we got this contamination. I grew up in Plainwell, when the Kalamazoo River was an open sewer. In the summertime, in July and August, we lived about a half mile from the river. We had to close our windows at night because that river stunk so bad. A1 disposal in Plainville. I don't know how many of you have been around long enough to remember A1 disposal, dumping all those chemicals on that back lot, stinking up everything. I mean, it was a horrible situation. And that was more than 20 years ago. So 20 years ago, these mills closed down here. And it would seem to me, and I know we got to use a little common sense here, but anybody with any common sense knew for a fact that there had to be pollution around here. I mean, if you look at any industrial site in the country, that's true. Now, when so I started thinking about that over the weekend, and I thought, well, what could have been done? Well, maybe back 20 years ago, they could have said, all right, we're going to put a law in it. You close a paper mill, what we're going to do is make you put together a pot of money for when that pollution eventually comes up. Or maybe they could have said, if you own that company, we want to have a registry of all the people who own that company. So when this comes up, we can go back to you. You made all your money putting this stuff in the ground. So now we want you to pay for cleaning it up. Right now, you got a problem.
No, we
Wouldn't
all
you
do.
like a regulation that has said that they had to tell you what they were putting over there, how much of it, and what happens with it? But then regulation's a dirty word. We all know that. Government regulation, get rid of them, get rid of them. Well, it's government regulations that keep them from poisoning us in our wells. It's government regulation that keeps them from dumping stuff on fields where people will get cancer 20 years from now. And so, but again, these people aren't responsible for that. None of these people are responsible for that because they weren't here. But, if you look at this problem here, okay, what could the local people have done? What could the people in Lansing have done? Probably more than they did, but they're all term limited out. This is a problem for the federal government. Now, we've had a representative over in Washington, D.C. for 30 years. He was here when those mills closed. Why wasn't he pushing for some type of, you know what, there's been poison all around Michigan. Why don't we have set up a fund so these people got to pay for what they did? Nope, didn't do that, didn't do nothing. And for 30 years over there in Washington, while they go ahead and poison us. Now, the thing is that EPA, I hear EPA. All right? So, EPA is a dirty word now. Everybody hates the EPA. Well, the EPA is who protects us from this stuff. So what I got to say is last year, we've had Enbridge in Michigan, we've had Flint in Michigan, now we have PFAS in Michigan, all this stuff in Michigan, all right? And yet, last October 2017, our representative in Washington, Fred Upton, supported cutting $1 billion from the EPA. $1 billion. Money that could go to protect us and protect our communities. The number one thing the federal government is supposed to do is protect us. Well, they protect us by buying aircraft carriers. Well, a lot of good those aircraft carriers do when we get poisoned by the water here, because our people in Washington won't do anything about it. And so everybody here is sitting saying, oh, this is horrible, and I thank everybody for everything they're doing. This should never have happened in the first place. And people are sitting here, well, what can I do? What can I do about it? Well, vote for people that won't let this crap happen. That's what you can do about it.
What about if people start getting sick from this stuff, who's going to pay their doctor and hospital bills? They shouldn't have to.
Understand that. We're gonna talk to the doctor here shortly, but I'm gonna move on.
But they're just telling us the same thing, that they don't have studies, but yet they know the answers. And these scientists that are saying the level should be lower, they don't know. But you know, but you don't have the studies, so you can't tell us what the health effects are, but you can tell us what the level should be. That's garbage. You know, be honest with people. If you don't know, you don't know. But don't tell people it's fine.
Thank you.
Just, Mr. Sorrell, one final thought. I just want to echo the uncertainty, the worry, the concern that we have about water in our community, potential health effects, what's happening. And I think it's real and it's palpable. And I just want to reiterate a few things that I mentioned at our first Parchment Town Hall. Speaking with regards to our local public health authority, that the first and foremost obligation of local public health is to protect the health of the public, and that we committed to further assessment. And that's what you're hearing this evening, the commitment for further assessment, to gain more information about what steps we need to take to learn more about what has happened and how to protect ourselves now and in the future. And again, the further commitment was to provide intervention. And that intervention includes the PFAS filters and also the bottled water as well. And those are the actions that local public health has taken in partnership with our state health partners, the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, and the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality. So I just wanted to reiterate that commitment that we have from you as your local public health authority.
Okay, we'll go on to our presentation from Brian Newhoff, and Tom Wheat and Brian Vilmont are here this evening. And Brian and I attended with the city of Kalamazoo, city of Parchment, I know him, and the one other person, I can't remember which, but Brian's gonna give us the update on what that meeting was about and how it should hopefully bring us a permanent solution.
Thank you very much. Again, my name is Brian Vilma. I'm with the engineering firm of Brian and Newhoff. We do a lot of civil engineering work, so our business is water, wastewater, roads, things like that, all the things underground. So the civil engineer, our job is to serve the public and help you guys get the infrastructure that you want and need. What I want to talk about tonight and present to council is the meeting that we had with DEQ. As Supervisor Sorensen said, we met a few weeks ago. It was their representatives from Parchment, from Cooper Township, and from City of Kalamazoo, as well as representatives from the DEQ who administer a particular program called the DWRF, or Drinking Water Revolving Fund. I want to make it very clear when I start this that all I'm talking about is presenting what we found out or the information for the DWRF program. It is not the only way to finance water projects, okay? It is a way to finance water projects. So for example, you can do things like, and as you guys are all aware, there are things such as special assessment districts that can be done. Contractor cash to have a water main installed. You can bond for projects, which basically means you borrow money as a government bond, and that goes out in the open market. Those are all mechanisms that are very valid. What we're not trying to propose here or say here is that this DWRF program is the only way or the way that was proposed to do this. We just want to present information on a way that we've researched and share that information. So again, please, if there's any questions while I talk about this, please let me know. So I'll just briefly go through what the DWRF program is and our discussions with the DEQ. So the DWRF program, as I mentioned, is a Drinking Water Revolving Fund. It has a sibling program called the SRF, or Sewer Revolving Fund, set up for the state of Michigan. That program was intended to utilize mostly in-state tax dollars and some federal money to help fund water and sewer projects. Those are, in essence, the reason that they started those was, if some of you may recall, years and years ago, there were interest rates up as high as 16%. And it was really hard for a municipality to bond for a project when you had to pay 16% interest on a bond, or a loan, for infrastructure. So the state set up this Drinking Water Revolving Fund and also the Sewer Revolving Fund. Let's stick with the drinking water. Those are in essence low interest loan programs. So a municipality could set up a project, borrow from this state fund, and then pay back that fund over time. It was a very good program for large projects. It really was not intended for small projects. When I say small, in that realm, it's anything under, let's say, $1 million. Because there are, of course, strings attached to any kind of a funding program. Especially with the federal money, there's a lot of investigatory studies that have to be done. You have to do historical studies. You have to do archaeological studies, environmental impact statements, things like that. They really view those projects as if you were going to build a new treatment plant in the middle of nowhere, so you had to see what impact you had. There's some impetus now for trying to streamline some of that process for easier projects, such as if you're trying to do a water main in a roadway area that's already been disturbed. That's underway. But either way, the system right now is set up to kind of run all the projects through the same process. That process is a little bit of a lengthy one for the DWRF program. The applications, it's basically a loan application, are accepted once a year at DEQ. That application is called a project plan, and it involves and includes all those things such as alternative analysis, environmental impact, archaeological impacts, all those factors. That application takes about 300 person-hours to put together. It's a large effort. And it doesn't happen right away, so it takes some time to put together. But that final project plan or application is due in May, when you can submit to DEQ. Their process is they accept all the applications around the state, and it's a competitive process, right? Competitive program. So they look at all the applications that come in and score them and rank them and come out with their preliminary project list in July. And then once that preliminary project list is published, and there's a 30-day comment period, then around mid-September they come up with a final project list and say who's going to get funded and in what amounts. So that's the start of that timeline. Now, prior to that May deadline, when you submit your final plan, the DEQ would like to have at least a couple months before that for you to submit your preliminary plan, so they can review it and comment, so that you can get a good application in at that May deadline. So now we're talking a month and a half or 2 months prior to that, they'd like to see the preliminary plan. Prior to the preliminary plan, you've got to have a series of public meetings on each of those, on parts of the plan. So all that needs to, as you can see, starts to back up the timeline, which means if we want to utilize the direct program and submit next year in 2019, we really would need to start some of that application process and preparing that information now, because it just takes some time to get it all those ducks in a row. Some information about the program itself is, even though it is a low interest loan program and it is a competitive process, there is a potential for what we call principal forgiveness. Now, because there's some federal money involved, the feds would like some of that federal money to be used for, I guess, assistance. There's many ways that the DEQ can use that federal money to provide assistance to a project, and our Department of Environmental Quality has elected to use primarily the vehicle of principal forgiveness. And what happens is, remember I mentioned that you submit the application in May. In July or so, they come out with that preliminary project list. Once they have that, they know about how many projects will be submitted in that round. They can look at how much federal money they have to divvy up and can start to make some assessments on where they might be able to use some of the federal money for principal forgiveness. Okay? And then by the time they issue the final project list in September, that's when they'll know how much any individual loan might have principal forgiveness applied to it. Okay? And again, it's competitive, so the more communities that submit, the fewer dollars are already given to each community. So that's the process for that loan program.
So in that process, you know, we have really 3 municipalities that have a hand in this, and one being the city of Kalamazoo, one being the city of Parchment, and of course all you here tonight and others from Cooper Township that are on private wells. So it is a long process. We're hoping that the 3 communities will move forward with this, being Cooper and Parchment and Kalamazoo, possibly even Kalamazoo being the applicant for both.
Right, and I can speak to that. So technically, each entity, Cooper and Parchment and Kalamazoo, could each go on their own and submit individual applications. That's possible. One of the other things we talked about with DEQ was having potentially the city of Kalamazoo be the applicant, because they would technically be the water supplier. Now, one of the things that came up with that is, if the DEQ were to give this loan to the city of Kalamazoo for a project, we can define what that project area is. Typically, those loans run 20 years. Okay? If you are deemed to be a disadvantaged community, meaning you meet certain either economic conditions through either rates or income, and you are determined as disadvantaged, you then qualify potentially up to a 30-year loan period. Okay? However, one of the things the DEQ said is, if the city of Kalamazoo were to be the applicant, and let's say we used a 20-year loan period, what the DEQ would like to see is a long-term 20-year agreement between Parchment, Cooper, and the city of Kalamazoo to utilize city of Kalamazoo water as a water supplier. Because the DEQ's mind, they're saying, if we're going to loan city of Kalamazoo 20 years worth of money for these improvements, we want to make sure that the communities that are benefiting from that loan are using that water for 20 years. So that's one consideration. Then you would need to enter into a long-term agreement if the city were the applicant. A couple other things that are beneficial, things that are beneficial with that loan program then again are those payments they're very low interest. When we're talking low interest, we're talking like 2.25%. So it's a really low interest loan, so that's very helpful, and again spreads that payment over a 20-year period. The other thing that I want to speak to with the timeline is what it does to construction, because we mentioned that the applications, the next round of applications are due in May of next year. It's 2019. You don't find out whether you can receive a loan until September of 2019, and you don't know what your potential principal forgiveness might be, if there is any, until September. Okay? Then you request a particular loan closing date, and that would probably be spring of 2020. Again, this is not a fast process for this particular funding mechanism, which means you can close in 2020, which means you wouldn't be able to start construction until spring of 2020. Okay? So again, with this funding mechanism, that is how the wheels turn on this particular one.
And as Brian said, this is one option. It's not the only option. I know when you hear special assessment districts, and that raises everybody's ears. That's not what we're in Cooper looking to do. We're going to have additional meetings with the city of Kalamazoo, city of Parchment, hopefully some powers that be in Lansing at the DEQ, and Margaret and our representative Beth Griffin as well. I mean, we're looking at all options on this, and I don't think it's right for anybody to have to be on a filter for that period of time. But there again, we're going to explore every particular option we can to make sure that there's a permanent solution. So, yes, sir.
So you've been talking about a loan and blah, 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 blah. What is the loan for?
Running municipal water.
To north of G Avenue and east
Yes.
of River Creek?
That's exactly. And it also is going to serve twofold, actually, because there's a dead end point of the Parchment water system. I'm just using Parchment water system because that's really what it is. It's being served now by Kalamazoo. There's a dead end point on McKinney, there's a dead end point on the corner of Sawmill and Thayer. With the expansion of the system, as it would be in that area, it would loop the system and give a better water quality to the customers by not having a dead end loop. So I mean, it serves many different things, and also in that drinking water revolving fund, there's an opportunity for different components. One would be the extension of water system into Cooper Township. Other areas would be possibly fixing and removing lead services that are existent within the city of Parchment and maybe even the city of Kalamazoo as the applicant. So there's so many different legs to this and costs that I want water Cooper as fast as we can get it. I know the other stuff is something that we have to look at all the options, and we don't want to leave principal forgiveness money on the table if there is other areas that can be used to improve the system. And the first year would be extending the system. The second phase might be lead services. Third phase might even be looking at what's going on in Richland right now too, because I mean that's a similar system, and that's not an easy fix as it was for the municipal water supply in Parchment, because they were less than 100 feet apart in 3 places they could reconnect. They don't have that out there in Richland. So, but anyway, that's what I know. Martin?
Is there any way to clean that up where they dumped all that stuff back off of, in the back of the mill there? Where all that garbage is, they just dump piles and piles. Is there any way to dig that all out of there and go dispose of it properly?
I don't have the answer to that, but it's something that I would like the answer to as well as you. Laura?
Laura Boykin, 1317 East G. Are they going to look at the aluminum company and what it's putting into our ground?
That has been looked at as well. Thank you.
What did they find?
I don't know. I don't believe we've gotten any results back from near the aluminum company yet. So, yes, ma'am.
Just curious, is Parchment, I don't know if you know this or not, in Cooper, is Parchment in a financial situation where they would actually be able to drill new water wells and not be on a contract with the city of Kalamazoo for 20 years?
I can't answer that. I don't know. That would be a question for the city manager or the mayor. Mark?
Does the township actually own the property where the landfill was?
By default, when they went bankrupt, yes.
Thank you.
These are, I don't want to preempt anybody's questions on that, but are there any questions on the DWF program or the meeting we have with DEQ regarding that?
That'd be from the board at this point.
Okay,
All right.
thank you.
Thank you for your presentation, Ryan. Okay. And we'll get our agenda finished up here, and if anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to stick around, I think, along with the DHS and DEQ.
Can I throw out one more question, please?
Yes.
My name's
John Bach, I live on Spartan Drive. A lot of us just had a lot of uproar over the sewer system. We're gonna be putting in infrastructure for water and cleaning up the roads. Is there consideration for trying to propose the sewer system again in areas where it's not really needed?
No, and the only way, first off, I've got a larger group now, and I'd like people to hear this, I've said it to individuals. When we looked at the sewer system, we first looked at, and I know Mr. Markham when he was here, we looked at Riverview Drive and Keys Drive. And when we spoke with our engineers on that particular project, and as Brian mentioned earlier about size of project, we looked at rural development, USDA rural development funds, which were 40-year term as opposed to 20, and a very, very low interest rate, like he had mentioned, like 2.25%. And they said that they did not look favorably on a small 200-home sewer project. So what we had done was looked at a larger area up where you guys are, and came up with a project. The mistake that was made was mine, and I'll take full ownership on it, is that when we were having these conversations, and we were going to have a public hearing, and I know Deanna and Carol in our office, the three people that work here full-time, were under the assumption, and we all know what that spells, that, absolutely, is that you folks that were in that area had 30 days to digest the presentation we were going to give and to say yes or no. When the public hearing notice went out, you didn't have that luxury. You were given the day of the meeting, and it mobilized, brought people together in probably a way that people don't like to have to get together. I'll take that ownership for that. That was not what happened, and I apologize for that. But what we really wanted to do that night was to have an informational meeting with the engineers that were developing the project, to give you the information that you wanted. And then you'd have 30 days to say, hey, we want this or we don't want this. Or maybe we scale back the project or somehow. That was my mistake, and I apologize for it. But it's just the way it happened. And I appreciate, some people on the Concerned Citizens group, when I said get involved, I wanted to get involved because it was the first night when Mr. Peralt was here. He was the only one here, and he brought that to our attention at this board table like 4 months ago. And we were looking, holy. And I don't blame people for being upset. But this water issue, it was even said on there that, oh, look, they retaliate, and now we got poisoned water. Well, come on. That's not what happened. I certainly hope nobody even thinks that. But we've got a situation here